हेलो मेरे प्यारे दोस्तों। तो कैसे हो आप सब? आई होप आप सब बहुत बढ़िया होंगे। तो मैं आ गई हूँ अपनी एक नई बुक के साथ। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं कि मुझे रीडिंग करना कितना पसंद है, तो आइए आप भी मेरे साथ रीडिंग करें इन शॉर्ट स्टोरीज़ को जो कि मुल्क राज आनंद की लिखी हुई हैं। ये हैं इस बुक की कुछ स्टोरीज़ जिन्हें हम पढ़ेंगे और कोशिश करेंगे इन्हें कुछ ही दिनों में ख़त्म करने की। अगर आप लोग भी तैयार हैं मेरे साथ नए लोगों करैक्टर से मिलने के लिए, तो कमेंट येस इन द कमेंट सेक्शन। The Lost Child. It was the festival of spring. From the wintry shades of narrow lanes and alleys emerged a gaily clad humanity, thick as a swarm of bright colored rabbits issuing from a warren. They entered the flooded sea of sparkling silver sunshine outside the city gates and sped towards the fair. Some walked, some rode on horses, others sat, being carried in bamboo and bullock carts. One little boy ran between his parents' legs, brimming over with life and laughter. The joyous morning gave greetings and unashamed invitations to all to come away into the fields full of flowers and songs. Come, child, come, called his parents, as he lagged behind, arrested by the toys in the shops that lined the way. He hurried towards his parents, his feet obedient to their call, his eyes still lingering on the receding toys. As he came to where they had stopped to wait for him, he could not suppress the desire of his heart, even though he well knew the old cold stare of refusal in their eyes. I want that toy, he pleaded. His father looked at him red eyed in his familiar tyrant's way. His mother, melted by the free spirit of the day, was tender and giving him her finger to hold, said, Look, child, what is before you? The faint disgust of the child's unfulfilled desire had hardly been quelled in the heavy, pouting sob of a breath, mother, when the pleasure of what was before him filled his eager eye. They had left the dusty road on which they had walked so far. It wandered its weary way circuitously to the north. They had come upon a footpath in a field. It was a bowering mustard field, pale like melting gold as it swept across miles and miles of even land. A river of yellow liquid light, ebbing and falling with each fresh eddy of wild wind, and straying in places into broad, rich tributary streams, yet running in a constant sunny sweep towards the distant mirage of an ocean of silver light. Where it ended, on one side stood a cluster of low mud walled houses, thrown into relief by a dense crowd of yellow robed men and women from whom arose a high pitched sequence of whistling, creaking, squawking, roaring, humming noises sweeping across the groves to the blue throated sky like the weird, strange sound of Shiva's mad laughter. The child looked up at his father and mother, saturated with the shrill joy and wonder of this vast glory, and feeling that they, too, wore the evidence of this pure delight in their faces. He left the footpath and plunged headlong into the field, prancing like a young colt, his small feet timing with the fitful gust of wind that came rich with the fragrance of more distant fields. A group of dragonflies were bustling about on their gaudy purple wings, intercepting the flight of a lone black butterfly in search of sweetness from the flowers. The child followed them in the air with his gaze, till one of them would fold its wings and rest, and he would try to catch it, but it would go fluttering, flapping up into the air when he had almost caught it in his hands. One bold black bee, having evaded capture, sought to tempt him by whining around his ear and nearly settled on his lips. When his mother gave a cautionary call, Come, child, come on to the footpath, he ran towards his parents gaily and walked abreast of them for a while, being, however, soon left behind, attracted by the little insects and worms along the footpath that were teeming out from their hiding places to enjoy the sunshine. Come, child, come, his parents called him from the shade of a grove where they had seated themselves on the edge of a well. He ran towards them. An old banyan here outstretched its powerful arms onto the blossoming jack and jamun, neem and champak and secretia and cast its shadows across beds of golden cassis and crimson gulmohar as an old grandmother spreads her skirts over her young ones. But the blushing blossoms freely offer their adoration to the sun in spite of their protecting chaperone by half covering themselves, and the sweet perfume of their pollen mingled with the soft, cool breeze that came and went in little puffs, only to be wafted aloft by a strong breeze. A shower of flower petals fell upon the child as he entered the grove, and, forgetting his parents, he began to gather the raining petals in his hands. But lo, he heard the cooing of a dove and ran towards his parents, shouting, The dove, the dove! The raining petals dropped from his forgotten hands. A curious look was on his parents' faces till a coil struck out a note of love and released their pent up souls. Come, child, come, they called to the child, who had now gone running in wild capers round the banyan tree, and gathering him up, they took the narrow, winding footpath which led to the fair through the mustard fields. As he neared the village, the child could see many other footpaths full of throngs converging to the whirlpool of the fair, and felt at once repelled and fascinated by the confusion of the world he was entering. A sweetmeat seller hawked gulab jamun, rasgulla, barfi, jalebi at the corner of the entrance, and a crowd pressed round his counter at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets, decorated with leaves of silver and gold. The child stared open eyed and his mouth watered for the burfi that was his favorite sweet. I want that burfi, he slowly murmured, but he half knew as he begged that his plea would not be heeded because his parents would say he was greedy. So, without waiting for an answer, he moved on. A flower seller hawked, a garland of Kulmore, a garland of Kulmore. The child seemed irresistibly drawn by the implacable sweetness of the scents that came floating on the wings of the languid air. He went towards the basket where the flowers were heaped and half murmured, I want that garland. But he well knew his parents would refuse to buy him those flowers because they said they would say they were dear. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. A man stood holding a pole with yellow, red, green, and purple balloons flying from it. The child was now carried away by the rainbow glory of the silken colors, and he was possessed by an overwhelming desire to have them all. But he well knew his parents would never buy him the balloons because they would say he was too old to play with such toys. So he walked on farther. A juggler stood playing a flute to a snake which coiled itself in a basket, its head raised in a graceful band like the neck of a swan, while the music stole into its invisible ears like the gentle rippling of a soft, slow waterfall. The child went towards the juggler, but knowing his parents had forbidden him to hear such coarse music as the juggler's played, he proceeded farther. There was a roundabout in full swing. Men, women, and children, carried away in a whirling motion, shrieked and cried with dizzy laughter. The child watched them intently going round and round, a pink blush of a smile on his face, his eyes rippling with the same movement, his lips parted in amazement, till he felt that he himself was being carried round. The ring seemed to go fiercely at first, then gradually it began to move less fast. Presently, the child, wrapped finger in his mouth, saw it stop. This time, before his overpowering love for the anticipated sensation of movement had been chilled by the thought of his parents' eternal denial, he made a bold request. I want to go on the roundabout. Please, father, mother. There was no reply. He turned to look at his parents. They were not there, ahead of him. He turned to look on either side. They were not there. He looked behind. There was no sign of them. A full, deep cry rose within his dry throat, and with a sudden jerk of his body, he ran from where he stood, crying in red fear, Mother, Father. Tears rolled down from his eyes, hot and fierce. His flushed face was convulsed with fear. Panic stricken, he ran to one side first, then to the other, hither and thither in all directions, knowing not where to go. Mother, father, he wailed with a moist, shrill breath now, his throat being wet with the swallowing of spittle. His yellow turban came untied, and his clothes, wet with perspiration, became muddy where the dust had mixed with the sweat of his body. His light frame seemed heavy as a mass of lead. Having run to and fro in a rage of running for a while, he stood defeated, his cries suppressed into sobs. At little distances on the green grass, he could see through his wet eyes men and women talking. He tried to look intently among the patches of bright yellow clothes, but there was no sign of his father and mother among these people, who seemed to laugh and talk just for the sake of laughing and talking. He ran hotly again, this time to a shrine to which people seemed to be crowding. Every little inch of space there was congested with men, but he ran through people's legs, his little sob lingering, Mother, Father. Near the entrance to the temple, however, the crowd became very thick. Men jostled each other, heavy men with flashing murderous eyes and hefty shoulders. The poor child struggled to thrust away between their feet, but knocked to and fro by their brutal movements. He might have been trampled underfoot had he not shrieked at the loudest pitch of his voice, Father, Mother. A man in the surging crowd heard his cry and, stooping with very great difficulty, lifted him up in his arms. How did you get here, child? Whose baby are you? The man asked as he steered clear of the mass. The child wept more bitterly than ever now and only cried, I want my mother, I want my father. The man tried to soothe him by taking him to the roundabout. Will you have a lift on the horse? He gently asked as he approached the ring. The child's throat tore into wild, deep, shrill sobs, and he only shouted, I want my mother, I want my father. The man headed towards the place where the jugglers still play on the flute to the dancing cobra. Listen to that nice music, child, he pleaded, but the child shut his ears with his fingers and shouted his double pitched strain, I want my mother, I want my father. The man took him near the balloons, thinking the bright colors would distract the child's attention and quieten him. Would you like a rainbow colored balloon? He persuasively asked. The child turned his eyes from the flying balloons and just sobbed, I want my mother, I want my father. The man, still importunate in his kindly desire to make the child happy, bore him to the gate where the flower seller sat. Look, can you smell those nice flowers, child? Would you like a garland to put round to your neck? The child turned his nose away from the basket and reiterated his sob, I want my mother, I want my father. Thinking to humor his disconsolate charge by a gift of sweets, the man took him to the counter of sweet shop. What sweets would you like, child? He asked. The child turned his face from the sweet shop and only sobbed, I want my mother, I want my father.